Hey, how's it going? This is Sam Welker with thinkparticle.com, and in this exciting new video, we're going to be talking about planet rendering. So we're going to be walking through basically how I created this render right here, and we're going to be using the Octane Studio Kit and Octane Render to make it. You don't need the Octane Studio Kit, we're just going to use it because it's quick and easy. So Octane is beautiful. It is an amazing renderer. It does have a bit of a look to it, but I think that's okay. I'm a really big fan of it. So if you look at this render right here, you can see, it's got a lot of really nice edginess to it. And it's just something I'm a really big fan of. But that's not space, this is. So this is a silhouette of a planet. And we're going to do something like that today, something a little bit more like this. We're going to be creating this planet, this procedural planet, in Octane, and it's all going to be with what comes in Cinema 4D plus a few textures from cgtextures.com and other places, other free textures around the web. You're going to have to find your own textures in this case, but if you're going to need some, my recommendation is going to ground and finding good grass shots and nature, and also some good dirt shots, some good pictures of dirt. Wide, good ones, soil, those will be really good. You could also grab ones of water and see if you could find any really big water textures that you could use with foam and regular water, but we're gonna use that one 100% procedurally for the water. And then we're gonna make some clouds on top of it that are gonna look really cool. So anyways, it's all going to be using the Octane Studio Kit in this case, just to help light it. So you can learn more about that at thinkparticle.com and find all of our other great training videos. So let's go ahead and get started. So in the plan that I have written down, which I'm actually going to do this time, is it's going to be starting off by just blocking this out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lay out the scene. So the first thing I want to do is make a really big sphere, maybe 400 centimeters. It's not really that big, but it's bigger. We're going to give it enough segments so it's nice and round on the edge. Maybe a little bit more. Just go a little over the top with this one just to be safe. I don't want any blockiness on the edge, because that's a dead giveaway. The next thing I want to do is just grab a camera and jump into it, and I'm going to just, what I'm using here is just my mouse wheel to zoom and cycle between the focal lengths. And I'm probably going to just use an 80mm lens. In space, a very wide angle lens is probably a little bit more practical. It's like a satellite shot. So we're going to use an 80mm lens in this case for starters. And we're just going to go ahead and get started. And what we're going to do is we're going to work in just the materials first. So the first thing we're going to do is create a, we're going to create 2 glossy materials and a mixed material. Then we're going to jump into the node editor and grab that first glossy one. We're going to name this the planet. Then we're going to go to the next glossy and we're going to name it water. Okay. Oops. And then we're going to go to the mix texture and name it planet mix. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is just go into the planet texture, and we're going to open this up quite a bit. I love this node editor, by the way. Working with nodes is just great. Both in Arnold and Octane is just a lot of fun. It helps you think, which I'm not doing a whole lot of right now. Image texture is the first thing we're going to grab. We're going to grab 2 of those. Actually, we're probably just going to grab 1 for now, and then grab a mix texture. And we're just going to go ahead and go into the shader settings and grab a file. And we're going to go into the textures that I have here, and we're going to just find a nice little dirt texture. So the first thing I want to do is go down and look through these and find which different textures I have. Probably just a good dirt, like I mentioned. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do a rock texture. It's going to be better this way, I think. Get a good, repeatable, layered texture. Maybe not repeatable, but we'll just grab this one. And before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I'm going to go to Think Particle Tutorials, and we're going to name this the Procedural Planet in Octane. I'll just copy that, go in, and paste it, and hit save. Okay, so now here comes the fun. Do-do-do-do. That's another Beatles reference. I mean, the first Beatles reference. You know me, I like to make references. If you know me, if you've watched my tutorials before. Really, most of all, I just like to ramble. So let's go ahead and grab another good rock texture as well. I'm thinking probably this one. And that'll be good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab a noise. And we're actually just going to use the default Cinema 4D noise here to mix these. And that's going to give us this really nice mix of texture here. So I'm going to grab a wavy turbulence and set the octaves to, well, I'll do that in a bit. We'll set the global scale to 400. And this is where it starts to become important to set up just a base lighting. So what we're going to do is we're going to just drop that texture onto the planet and then just go ahead and let it render and see if checking seamless makes any difference on that edge there. It doesn't. So one of the things is this texture right here is a large texture, which is great, but it would be better to have something seamless. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch it out with something that is seamless. So as you can tell now, this sphere is now seamless, which is great. So we're going to grab both of these textures right here and just add a UV transform. And I'm actually just going to apply it to both of them, which is going to be really fun. And we're going to set it to 0.5 by 0.5 by 0.5, maybe 0.25 by 0.25. Okay, I think we could do a little bit better than that. So 0.1, 0.1, and 0.1. And that's nice. What will help here is changing it by, that's actually a little small. Let's do 0.4 all around. Okay. So now we can just use the noise, and I'm actually going to undock this. Let's see if we can mix these panels together. Just going to maximize this. This will be plenty good. All right. So this noise texture is going to be used to help generate this planet. Wow, I really like this layout. I'm just going to geek out for a second about that. All right. And I'm going to add some roughness to the planet for the moment. And I am going to go into the texture, and we're going to go ahead and work with just a basic HDRI image for now, just to kind of help give a little variation in the lighting so that I can understand visually how this works a little bit better. And one thing I need to do is make sure that it's not overly bright. And there we go. That's great. Okay, so as you can see, this texture is starting to come together already. Now there is that edge there. And one thing we can do about that is check the projection settings and see if changing it to spherical for both of these will be helpful. And that's not bad. So now our texture is starting to come together. And one thing I want to do is kind of have two different textures for the ground. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste it. And I'm just going to move all of these down. So the first thing to do is select all of them, move them down, apply all the transforms and the projections. Okay. And then I'm going to just link it all up together, and then we'll switch out these nodes over here on the left. And what we're going to do with those is we're going to turn those into more of a grassy texture. So we're going to mix these two together and then apply that to the diffuse, and then we're going to just adjust this a bit. Okay, so the next thing to do is grab a nice dirt grassy texture, and another one. Let's see if there's any grass textures here. This will be good. Okay, that'll be good. And then what we can do is grab one more noise, and that noise will allow us to, as you can see, the grass is kind of bleeding through here. And what I want to do actually is just kind of adjust it so that we use some turbulence to build out the scene. And I'm going to set it so that it looks like this. And it'll blend these two textures together, which we have our grassy texture and our rock texture. And what that gives us is just a solid variation across the map. And one thing I'm going to do is, because I can, I'm just going to take these transforms and apply them completely across the map so that we just have a consistency there. Because there's no need to have too many nodes in the tree if I'm not going to use all those variations. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and grab another noise texture, bring it over, and grab some displacement, and drop that into the displacement, and then use the noise to displace the material. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that the displacement level of detail is good. I'm going to set the displacement amount to probably 2 or 3. We'll start with 5. And I'm going to use a wavy turbulence value, maybe like 200, add some contrast to it, set it to 25 and 75, and see how that works. And there is a seam value on that edge, but we'll just go ahead and back away from that for now, and it'll be fine. I'm going to add some more level to the detail for the actual displacement for now, just to see if that'll help. And that is too big, so I'm going to set that to probably 80 and see how that turns out. So that's better, but I think for a planet, that's just a little too big in detail. It'd be good for like a little asteroid or something, but there you go. Alright, so we're going to set the next thing of the relative scale. We're going to make that a little wider and kind of make it look like they're mountain ranges. And go into the displacement value and set that to 3. Okay, 2, 1. Okay, so now that does have that value variation. I'm going to apply that as well to the bump. Actually, I'm going to copy and paste that and apply that variation to the bump. Or, actually, no. What I'm going to do, I just deleted something. What did I delete? Oops. Come back, Cinema 4D. Okay, good. I hit the wrong button. Alright, take that. Do not delete it. Did I delete something? Okay, good. We're good. Alright, I'm going to grab a color correction node, drop in that texture, drop that into the brightness, and then I'm just going to grab that and set that to like 0.1. And, oops, I turned up the contrast. I do not want to do that. Maybe 0.2, 0.15. Just get that variation in there and that detail. And there are edges still, but I think we'll be okay with that for now. That's something we could change with texture mapping and with the projection later. Actually, we could just change it right now, technically. We could change it to Mesh UV and see if that helps. I think part of the problem is that these noises that we're using are not set to a value that is friendly to that sort of mapping. So one thing we could do is adjust that, but I'm not going to spend too much time doing that right now. What I am going to do, however, is go ahead and move on. So we've got this planet set right here. I'm going to adjust these settings just a bit more, and I'm going to make the I'm going to change the scale of this to probably 15 and 150 and see how that turns out. Oh, and change the octaves to 8. No, we'll change it to 10. Nah, 9. and resend the scene just to make sure it's all set. Nice and pretty. And I'm getting some weird variations here, but it should be okay. And we'll rename this to Planet. Alright, now that's good enough for now. It does have a few artifacts, but I think that's just a bug that we'll come to later. Alright, so we're going to get the active material, and what we're going to do is go ahead and select the water, go back to this, and hit Get Active Material. Okay, what we're going to do is go ahead and go to the diffuse, change it to S8 or HSV, and just turn it down. Go to the index, 1.3 will be fine. Give it a little bit of roughness. Okay, now we're going to go into the noise, and we're going to apply that to diffuse. We're going to grab two different values here. We're going to grab a really dark, nice blue, and then kind of a more cyan, dark color. And we're going to set the noise type to Luca, and set it to 40, and give it some contrast, maybe like 20 and 80. Actually just 20 and 100, and that'll be good. And that is a good start for the water texture, but I think we could do a little better. We're going to make it a little grayer and a little brighter. One thing about this is from space, you don't necessarily see the reflection of the water so much as you see sorry, brain going down, not thinking straight. You will see the bottom of the ocean in some renders, in my experience at least, I think. So we'll go ahead and try that. So I'm going to, however, use a different setting here. And one thing that might help is going into the Octane settings. You can find these under Octane settings in your menu up here. Go into the settings of the settings, go to the C4D shaders, and change that to 2048. Because 2048 is a great game, and because that's going to allow us to have a to really use the textures that we're procedurally generating at the scale that we want them, because right now this isn't giving us enough detail. And that should, theoretically speaking, solve our problems. So we're going to go ahead and grab these noises. There we go. That's a lot better. And we're going to go ahead and drop down this texture a little bit darker. That's a lot better already. And I'm going to take that roughness value and just pull it down. And one thing here is that this is a glossy texture, and technically we should be using a specular texture. So we can try that for now and see how that turns out. In my render, I did use a glossy texture though. And what we're going to use is a medium. And we're going to use a texture medium. So we're going to use a scattering medium. And we're going to start by just using this as the absorption and dropping that into the medium and going into the medium settings and seeing how it turns out. And I'm going to use that as a scattering medium as well. Maybe not the absorption. And set it to 200. And then grab an RGB color. Okay, we're going to just grab a RGB spectrum and drop that into the absorption. And pull that brightness up and give it some color. A lot of color that is probably going to be red. Going to go back to this, set the scale, try 25 for now and see how that turns out. And then go into the noise settings. And this is going to be better if we brighten it up a bit. And it'll allow us to really kind of see the ocean as the colors that it is. And if we just let that sit and render for a moment, it will show how it looks to us. And that's a very blue ocean. I actually really like it a lot. This RGB spectrum could use with a little bit of toning down, I think. We could turn down the scale as well a bit for now. I'm gonna turn up the noise settings right here from 40 to probably 150. And we'll see how that turns out. That's a little bit more of a, I mean, technically speaking, it'd be more like 0.005 at the scale for that type of simulation that we're doing, but for the scale, I think it'll look better. And we're going to take that absorption color and make it almost black and see what happens. Okay, not exactly what I'm looking for. Let's see what happens when I pull up the scattering as well. Add some contrast to it and see if that adds some nice variation. Okay, clearly that helps. I'm not sure if texture-based values are actually really affecting this properly, so... anyways, I'm just going to pull this all down and get away from cyan and move a little bit more towards a little bit more of an ocean blue. So we'll just work with that right there. And that'll be a good texture. And the noise could probably use with some adjustment. I'm going to set it to 8. And that's really big too. So let's set the color 2 value to 10. And to save on render time, I'm going to pull the camera up and just focus on this this render region right here, because that's all we really need. I'm going to hit save. Okay, so the light more directly is going to give you this color, and more indirectly, which is actually a little bit more of what we're going to be seeing, is going to be more this dark color down here, which is good. I like that. And there's only going to be one light in the scene. We're not going to be using HDRI, so that'll be good. Alright, so I'm going to stop the render for a moment, and we're going to just jump out, and we have our 2 textures here. So I'm going to go ahead and close that window down. It's going to take a little moment. Still thinking. The GPU is catching up, and so is the CPU. So while that catches up, I'm going to pause this. Alright, so Cinema was taking a little while, so it froze and I just restarted it. So what I'm going to do really quick is just check where the texture left off for the planet, for the water, and see if it looks good up to par with what I was aiming for. And if we let that just calculate for a moment. That should be good. Alright, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about those waves. So really quick, I'm going to go into the bump and go into the noise and change it to just noise and set it to 10, maybe 12. And hopefully that will work out very well. So I'm just going to grab the render region. I think I've added too much contrast. Yeah. See how it looks right there. Set it to 2. Set it to 1. All right, so anyways, we're going to go ahead and just move on now. With whatever this is, you can put more time into it later if you want to. That should be good enough. Good enough for who it's for. All right, and I'm the client today, so I'm happy, and that's all that matters. All right, so we're going to add that mixed texture to that sphere, and we're going to add the water to the planet and the planet to the planet. And then we're going to add a noise. Yay! Noise is going to separate these two. And then we're going to add some contrast to that noise. We're going to go ahead and use a wavy turbulence. Set it to 300. And actually, I'm going to set it to like 50 and 75. 50 and 55. Actually, we might do 40 and 45. 40 and 50. There you go. Okay. So that'll give us an interesting variation. Set it to 7. As long as the client likes it. And when you're the client, that just means that you gotta have some fun. So I'm going to resend it to the scene and then set it up so the render region covers the area that I'd like. And you can actually already see where that texture is applying. So this is definitely a spot that I'd like where I can see both the land and the water. Though for some reason I can't see any water there, but I can up here. So you'll notice that the water is not all over where we're hoping for. So what I'm going to do is change those values in here by 10%. And it'll update, move around the scene. And I'm going to change this from 300 to 150. And that'll give us more of a continental feel. Especially over here. One thing you may also see is that some of these textures could definitely use with a little bit more of a scale or detail. So some of these could be brought down a bit. I'm also going to work on that roughness value. So the first thing is this land is really blown out, and I want to pull the specularity value down so that it's not too bright. So I want to pull it down quite a bit. And then I want to change the index to 1.6 probably. Maybe 1.8. That's a little bit more along the lines of what that land would look like. Because 1.3 is the refractive index of water. 1.5, 1.7 is glass. Things like that. And these are things that are going to help kind of make that difference there. Oops, that is definitely not what I wanted to do. Okay. So you'll see that that land now looks a lot better, and that water could probably actually use a little bit more of a boost in the scale. Oh, also it looks like the roughness is being affected. You know what, that's the bump actually. So if we turn off the bump for now, it's going to render a lot quicker. Okay, so I am going to add a little bit of roughness, like 0.05. You know what? I lied. That's what the bump will come in and do. All right, cool. So we've got this texture set set up in a pretty good manner for now. So the next thing we're going to do is create the clouds, okay? So we're going to create another sphere just by copying and pasting that. I grabbed the planet and held Control and dragged it underneath the other planet. And I'm going to rename this planet Clouds. Hit Enter. I'm going to stop the render. And it's still rendering. I'll just pause it. Okay. So we'll set this from 400 to 401. And we're going to go ahead and get rid of that material. And the next thing we're going to do is create a new Octane diffuse material. We're going to drop that on the clouds and call it Clouds. Just crazy idea, I know. Who would ever name their clouds Clouds? So we're going to let that load for just a moment. It's getting caught up. And then we're going to go ahead and use some texturing techniques to make this look like a cloud. So we're going to go ahead and open up the node editor one more time. Okay, and this is our diffuse material. And we're going to use a noise material. And we're going to go ahead and drop that into the diffuse, the roughness, the bump, and the opacity. And that should be good. And what we're going to do is set it to wavy turbulence, set it to 250 for now, and set it to probably 40 by 80. And maybe set it to 350 and 60 and 80. Nope, 50 and 80. And set the relative scale to 200 in the width, maybe 400 or 500, and then 150. And pull up that low clip value. Okay, and that's going to be just a little too big, so we're going to pull that down a bit. That looks a little bit more like clouds. Set it to 60. Okay, so what we're going to do actually is have two of these. We're going to have one be the opacity, and then one that's a little less, I guess, harsh in every aspect is going to be everything else. So actually, I believe the opacity is actually going to mimic that one. We're going to use this one for the bump. And we'll just try that really quick. And turn off the other planet. And this would be a good point to drop in a light from the Octane Studio Kit. And drag it out. And just get rid of that skylight, because it's not going to be useful to have that anymore, because it's just not how the lighting is going to work. So at this point, it will be better to match our final lighting style. So right now we're going to render just the clouds. So I've hit render to load in the scene. Give it just a minute while that gets loaded in. Alright, so there we go. So that could definitely use more detail and less stretching. So I'm going to drop down the stretch amount to 200 and drop down the low clip to 50. And actually I'm going to set the global scale to 120. Turn back on the planet. Maybe turn off that relative scale. Then I'm going to go into the Octane settings, turn off ambient occlusion. One thing I'll also do is turn the transmission up all the way white and give it a little bit of saturation with a blue tint. And that definitely helps bring out the clouds more. And if I change the planet to just be a planet without the water, those clouds are going to show up a lot easier. So I'm going to change, oops, I should probably have these match. And it would probably be a good idea to pull this out enough so that it doesn't get absorbed by the displacement. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that. Grab that noise and set it to 7. Change these settings back down to how I had them. Something like 100. And 120. That might be a little high. I think I'm going to set it to 80. Change the low clip value to 50. Change the high clip to 100. And the relative scale to 150 on the x-axis. See how that turns out. Okay, I'm going to change the opacity to pull it in a bit brighter. So that's starting to get there. Change that to 60. It's a bit high. Change it to 70. As you can see at the poles, it's clamping a bit, but we aren't going to actually put the camera over there right now, so that'll be okay. And then we're going to take this texture, copy, paste it, pull it down, and the opacity is going to be that higher contrast value. And then I'm going to take the noise from this value right here and set it to, let's go with 90. And that'll help with the brightness and the variation and things like that. And it'll look more like a cloud. And I'm going to take both of these and pull them down from 50 to 40 so we can have more clouds, because more clouds are always good. And I'm thinking I'm going to pull that global scale down again. I'm also going to take that planet and go to the displacement and turn it down to 1 and turn the bump map to 0.1. In fact, I might do it to 0.075. Okay, now we have our clouds on top of the scene. And we can rotate those according to our needs. And the nice thing about this is a completely animatable texture, because you can just take these textures right here and change the animation speed, and then you can also rotate the sphere. I'm going to give it a little less contrast and see if I can pull in more light. And change the scale, because it's still kind of lacking in the area that I was hoping for. Okay. Alright, cool. So, turn the transmission all the way up. And cool, we'll work with that. And we're going to put that planet texture with the water back on the planet. And we're going to go ahead and just make a few adjustments. So the first thing I want to do is change it from 100 on the global scale to, or 150 to 100. And maybe change it from 50 and 60 to 45. And try just leaving it for now. Then we'll go ahead and just change the seed value a bit until we find something that we're really happy with. I'm going to change it to 40 and 60. I'd rather have a big land mass right here. And we'll go ahead and actually adjust that land scale value to 150. That's pretty good. That noise texture on the clouds, though, is way too big, so we're going to set that down to 20. It's a good start. I'm actually going to pull that down to 10. And once we bring it down lower and give it enough detail, you can actually start to see these clouds are very wispy and very detailed, which is really cool, very helpful. So we'll go ahead and set that to a UV 2D texture. We could leave it at texture, it's fine. Doesn't really make a difference too much. We're going to pull down the value from 30 to 20 as well, and that's probably something I should probably copy these adjustments over. So what I'm going to do is select both of these. I'm just going to click in those fields and just hit enter, and that should, technically speaking, make the adjustments for me. So it didn't, but I can just do that on my own. Leave that a little higher contrast. Okay, so that whole scale at 15 isn't working, so we'll try 25. $40. And 40 is working with a smaller scale on the actual diffuse map. And because of that, that's causing it to have a little bit of that extra variation in there that you wouldn't get otherwise. And that's giving this nice cloud look. And I'm going to make the relative scale on here a lot wider. And now we have these clouds that are pulling off pretty well. I'm going to pull that contrast down a bit though. Probably set it for 40 and 60. Maybe 65. Too much of a hard edge there. And I don't want to take up too much more time. I've already taken so much, but I do want to make sure I get these values at a good spot. So I'm going to bring that low clip value down, and that's going to brighten it up a bit. Actually, that's not going to brighten it up. It's going to add more clouds, but that's okay. We'll bring it to 35 and leave it there, because that's giving a very nice variation and contrast that I'm liking. So we'll bring that to 35 and 75 and see how that works. Okay. And let's go ahead and take that water material. We're going to go to the medium node. And I'm going to go into each of these colors and just go to the HSV settings and just pull that contrast back a bit. Not that contrast, the saturation. Because realistically speaking, I don't think the colors are matching properly. So I'm going to pull it back and then just see how that works out. I'm also going to set the scale from 4 to probably 25 for now. and the roughness to 10. Or not the roughness, excuse me, the bump value, the noise texture in the bump to the higher or the brighter value to 10. So that water looks a little better now, and that land still is not working. So what I'm going to do is make sure that the roughness is just completely applied and turn off the other elements. Okay, so what's happening here is that the mixed texture isn't getting enough contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. And now that land doesn't reflect the way the water is, because it shouldn't. I'm going to pull that brightness down. That's a lot better. Okay. And then I'm going to add those clouds back in. Only the water should reflect in that form, and technically speaking, it shouldn't be reflecting. So I'm just dial the general visibility down in the Octane Studio Kit. And that's also in the Octane tags, so you can find that in there. Actually, I'm going to use a texture and use a gradient. And use a circle gradient. And set it to none. And pull that in quite a bit. And then I'm going to invert the knots. That didn't work entirely as I planned. There we go. Okay. So now if I change that to general visibility, it should be spherical, which will help. I'm going to set the temperature value to 8,000, which isn't entirely accurate to lighting, maybe 7,000, but it looks good for this. I'm going to set it to normalize and 250, maybe turn off normalize. Set it to probably 200 by 200 in the scale. Custom lighting color as well. I'm going to use a little bit of a bluer tint. Okay, now the one thing I am noticing is that those clouds, there's too many. And I can fix that by pulling this low clip value up from 35 to 45, and everything else should be good. And then that that value I have for the transmission could be pulled down just a bit, possibly. Also, the brightness of the clouds can have a little bit more variation in it. So I'm going to bring up the darkness. And I'm going to change the clip values, as you can see here, of the noise for the clouds. And that'll just bring down the brightness of the clouds. Another thing I can do is change this brightness value to probably 150. And we'll go with 200. Turn off the custom color. Set it to 6,000, see how that looks. Change it to normalize. Set it to 100. And lighting. That might be better. Okay. I'm going to turn off the camera visibility. And just kind of line up a camera. I'm going to take that camera. I'm going to rotate it 15 degrees on the... I don't even know what that is. I think it's going to bank 15 degrees. I'll try 10. Let's look at our reference here. Okay, so that is a direct in-your-face reference. What we need to do is get right over the land. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up the camera over the land, over where the lighting is right. Then we're going to grab the camera and we are going to change it from 80 to 50 and pull in. And then again, adjust so that the lighting is right, and then we'll actually move the planet itself. Whoop, that went too far. Tried to move the camera and it just rotated. Okay, so now we're going to take this and hit R. We're going to grab the planet and just rotate it a bit. I'm going to pull the camera back as well. We'll see how that works. Those clouds still not working entirely, so what I'm going to do is go into the node editor settings, change that scale from 40 to 10 on the opacity. Set it to 400 again on the x-axis, see how that works. Okay, that's too high, so we'll set it to 300. And we're going to set the low clip value from 45 to 55. Okay, it's a little small, so we're going to set that to 20. And 200. Okay. I think actually here the best thing to do is actually set it to a really high value. I know I keep on adjusting it, but I think it'll pay off to do this. Because it looks like what I did in the other aspect was, or in the other render was this right here. And then I'm going to pull down the low clip value. And it looks also like what I could do here is set this value to 8 for the octaves. And maybe pull it up even higher. Maybe to 220. And turn off the planet and just have the clouds and see how that works. Okay, so that'll be good. We'll set that to 150 though. A little smaller. But it'll work. Alright, so now we have our clouds and they're looking good. Go ahead and just let them apply to the scene. I'm gonna pull down the brightness high clip. Gonna make some adjustments so that it's nice and bright. Turn that transmission value back to a little bit of a bluer tint. Maybe not that much. Change the low clip value on that noise for the diffuse, rough, and bump. And the next thing I'm going to do is just change the seed value a little bit so that it lines up well. And change the high clip value, set it to 55, because I need to be able to see these. There we go. That'll be a good one. So 663. So now we can see our clouds. What we can do now is just grab those clouds, hit R, grab that rotation gimbal, and once that appears, you can just go ahead and rotate this value a little bit so that the clouds are pulling up and over the land a little bit. There we go. So that'll be a good value to start with. Alright, so let's go ahead and step forward. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, a little bit longer. So what we're going to do is finish setting up the lighting, and also the specularity on that water is really intense, and what I want to do is just kind of dial that down. So I'm going to set that like 0.5. See how that works? Maybe 0.25. And just a smidgen of roughness. Set it to almost 0.1. That's looking a lot better. It's not overexposing too much anymore. Alright, and a big part of this image right here is a lot of post-compositing. So I just basically got this whole section over here lit, and then what I did from there was I used a lot of Photoshop, just using gradients and a lens flare to kind of mock up the rest of this. So let's go ahead and rotate around. Get a little bit more of a direct view. And zoom in. And see how that's going. So one thing I'm going to do is go in to the settings for this noise right here, and I'm going to have the higher contrast noise on the bump map as well, and see if that helps adjust the intensity here. Oops, I've clicked the wrong button. One thing about GPU rendering is I've only got one GPU, and my computer needs the GPU to render and run at the same time, so sometimes that causes some problems, like screen recording. But I'm going to change those values on the noise to an octave value of 9, and that should be good. And we'll have this good render right here, and start to adjust the Octane render settings. I set it to 1280 by 720. I'm going to change the filter size from 1.2 to 1.8. Gives it more of an animated look. It's also a little easier on the eyes. I'm going to rotate the whole planet up a bit. I'm going to grab the softbox and change the scale from 200 by 200 to 100 by 100. Actually, I'm going to leave it at 200 by 200. Go into the detail settings. Just pull the sphere down. Or the circle, excuse me, the gradient. I'm going to resend the scene, see if that helps. I'm going to go back to the displacement, and I think right now adding the displacement and setting it to 2 instead of 1 will be okay. I think it'll look better. And I'm going to hit save and just kind of see how this works out. Okay, so one thing to notice now is the lighting is good. Those clouds are really intense. You know, I made all of those changes and I forgot to adjust to resend the scene, so that is going to really just intensely affect everything. So I'm going to change this cloud texture one more time so that the noise matches this. I made too many adjustments and I need to put it back, is what I'm saying. And I'm going to match the settings again so that the bump is the same as the roughness and the diffuse. Actually, roughness doesn't need it. I don't know why I was doing that. There you go. That would be why the clouds were looking just not how I wanted them to look. Oops, I took the roughness value out and it deleted the texture, so what I need to do is go back and make sure that that exists, because it was really doing well. This layout right here is great. You just need to make sure that for the clouds, you need to get those a separate bump with a lower contrast value than the actual opacity, and then you can just go ahead and take that roughness value out. I was thinking of applying that to the transmission, I think, is what I was thinking of, but I'm not going to do that. And then it's still kind of intense, so actually what I'm going to do is just pull that contrast down by adjusting it. Looks really cool. Very detailed, which I'm a big fan of. And I think I'm going to pull these clouds up over the land a little bit more and take this cloud section and put it up over this land section and then adjust the planet so that the light only barely hits that area. And then we'll be good. So what I'm going to do is just grab this rotation gimbal and just completely rotate the whole thing. Maybe even push it past it. And pull it out a bit so that it creates a shadow, which will be really cool. And then going back to that relighting everything. And I know I banked the camera 15 degrees, but I think I'm going to just put it back. I'm going to place this a little in the brighter area and just kind of see what it looks like. Cool, that looks pretty good. If I zoom out, I think that's all cloud right there. So I'm going to see what it looks like if I turn the diffuse to just plain diffuse. Actually, it looks pretty good. And then one thing I've noticed is that I think the cloud will look better if I A, turn the contrast down, and B, turn the brightest value down from 100% to something like 80% so it's still see-through. And then it's not painfully clipping. And it's still too bright, so I'm going to turn up the values to 50 and 80. 80. Maybe turn that brightest value back up to 100 instead of 80 and see how that works. Pull the brightness down to 70. I do want to be able to see the clouds, just not have them be, you know, painfully bright. So 65 should be good. I'm going to change that octave down from 9 to 7. Actually, no, I'm going to do that in the bump value. We are getting a little bit of artifacting over here in the clouds, and another way to fix that is just turn the octaves up substantially. So from 7 to, say, 11. And now, just for cleanliness, I need to make sure I resend the scene. And in just a moment it'll start rendering, and then we'll see what we need to do next on the clouds. We're almost done. Then we're going to make a star field and tweak the final lighting and the render settings and just go ahead and hit render. So one thing I did like actually is that that diffuse value does need to be there. It doesn't need to, but it makes a difference. Okay. So I'm going to save the scene and resend it one more time. And I did pull that contrast down in the clouds from 50 to 45 for the low clip in the opacity. And what that's causing there is now the clouds are going to be a little bit more prominent. So give it just a moment. Okay, that's pretty good. Clouds are over the land maybe a little bit more than I'd like in this case, but that'll be okay, I think. One thing I'd probably want to do is adjust the settings so that I have a texture map designed for this purpose, that these clouds can be nice and, I guess, designed in a way that they don't feel like they're so harsh. And one thing you could do is blur those bump values and go in and use gradient maps and things like that, and that might help. I'm going to go back into the lighting settings and just change a few adjustments. Make it brighter for a bit so we can see it better. See how everything looks. The clouds up here are nice and long and wispy. Down here they're a lot stronger, so I might actually pull those up. Just kind of put an edge over that water. And now those clouds are in view. And that's good. Okay. Those clouds also kind of look like mountains at that shape. So now I'm going to take that brightness value, pull it back down, pull the temperature value of the light back up to 7,000. Gives it a little bit of a bluer tint. Go to the Octane settings. I'm going to go to the camera imager. I think I might try... There's a lot of these I like. I think I'm going to do the DSC S315 number 5. That gives us this nice blue tint. So has plenty of values. I'm going to pull the vignette down. It's pretty good. At this point now, we're getting the final lighting in place. And I'm noticing that that color correction on the bump value could definitely be turned up. So I'm going to turn it up to 0.15. And then I'm going to resend the scene just to double check and make sure that that worked. Also, those clouds could use with a little less, I guess, brightness in the opacity. So I'm going to drop a color correction node in as well. So that land looks good. I'm going to grab that color correction node, drop it in right here. There we go. Finally got it. Alright, and I'm going to drop that into the cloud noise value into the texture and then out into the opacity. And then I'm just going to set that to 0.95. And that's just going to pull the opacity down just a smidgen. In fact, I might even just try 0.9 for now. And what that should do is take that brightest value of the opacity and just bring it down to a more comfortable, less visible level. And that'll help with the intensity of the cloud bump map. And if you give it just a moment, it's gonna take all those details, all those really high quality textures, and it's gonna think about them and push them in. Also, another thing you can do to help with that edging that we had on those clouds is to go into that Cinema 4D shaders and change those from 2048 to 4096 or something like that. But for now, I think this will be good. Looks really good, and the last thing I'm going to do is just kind of create a star field. So here's our current planet setup. I'm going to get a second view on this as well. So I'm going to scale up that light a bit more. That looks a little better. I think it looks a lot better, actually. It's a lot more realistic. Let's see, the sun is either 6,500 or 5,500 for the temperature, and I can't really recall right now. I think I'm going to go with 5,500 for now. And then I'll just adjust the color correction in post. And because I am using that texturing with that gradient right there, I am going to pull up that scale and I'm going to boost the brightness. Okay, that'll be good. And let's see. Looks like a little bit of a mountainous kind of, I guess, dirt, deserty terrain with maybe a little bit of forest over there, so that's kind of interesting. And then the clouds look good, and then the water seems actually to be a lot better than my other render that I had done. So now we're going to go ahead and create a star field by creating a sky, creating a Octane diffuse material, and we're going to just drop the diffuse value down. We are going to reset it just a bit. Right, this isn't how Octane works. We're going to actually create a texture environment, resend that, go into the environment tag and change that RGB spectrum to a noise value. I guess that's not going to work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a star map that I made, and I'll show you how I made it. Okay, so now we have those stars in the background, and those are helping kind of bring everything together. So here's our first render, and here's our second render. Okay, that's good. That's really good. Those stars make a big difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause or stop the render for a second. I'm going to go into a new scene. I'm going to create a sphere and just make it, I guess, perfectly round. Create a new material to go onto that sphere. And what I'm going to do is just go into the reflectance and set it to a reflection, just using the legacy version of reflection. Turn off roughness, just set it to 100%. Apparently you can set roughness in the reflection of the legacy version of reflection, and it's a lot faster. Well, that's news. Anyways, so there's that, and then I'm going to create a new material and set it to be the sky, drop it on the sky, turn off everything except for luminance, and go into the editor settings and set it to 1024. And I'm going to create a noise, and this is going to be set to a global scale of 1. And I'm going to pull up the low clip to probably about 72, and pull the higher value up to 70, or so about 75, and 85 should be good. Okay, and if I hit render, oh, way too many stars. So I'm going to set that to 83 and 90. Okay, that's good. So the next thing I'm going to do is go up and turn that into a layer, and then add some more noise to that, and then that's going to go to the color mode for overlaying. So I'm going to grab an orange color and a blue color and set these to like 400. And now those colors are going to be applied subtly to these colors in the background. So that's good. That's going to add a little bit more life to it. And I am going to adjust these colors just a smidgen. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is add a noise and screen it and turn down the brightness to probably about 15%. Set it to wavy turbulence. Set it to maybe 250. And just tweak those low clip values again. And bring it down really dark. And kind of give it a sort of a bluer tint. Maybe set it to like 750. And then that looks more like a nebula. Set it to 1%. still too bright, so I'm going to pull that down. You can tell by when you look at the render that it is starting to, I guess, cause problems. It's a little too visible. You can see it in the reflection. So I'm going to set that to 2. Maybe set it to add 1. I'm going to create a new color shader, and I'm going to just set that to screen and set it really, really low. And this one's just going to have a little bit of saturation in it. It's going to be this bluer value. And I'm going to pull the brightness down just a bit. Now everything's going to have that blue sort of feel to it. Which I think is good. So I'm going to go back to this other shader and kind of bring it into a bit more of a different color. Okay. I want to make sure that it's just ever so slightly visible. I'm going to set it to 600. Maybe 200. I'm going to do the same thing I just did, except for it's going to be 800. Maybe a little green as well. And set that to screen. Pull that brightness down. And now we have these nebulas. And this overall color. And now we can take that sphere, and what we can do is add a bake texture tag to it. And then we can go into the preview settings, and we're just going to grab the reflection. And then we can go ahead and change this to a radiance file, an HDR, and set it to 4096 by 4096. Okay, and then we're going to just go ahead and make sure that we find a place to save it. So I'm just going to go into my stock textures, stars, and this will be 360 blue 03 reflection. And I actually am just going to say blue 03, and then the reflection will actually become part of it when I render it out. So I'm just going to bake it, and it's going to slowly draw down. You can start to see it. Also, there's in the bake texture node, there's also the ability to bake the animated textures, which could be very useful in case you need to do that. So for a star map, maybe not the best thing, but in this case, it helps illustrate the principle. So I'm going to go back into the scene, go back into Octane, light up the scene again, but this time I'm going to grab the third star map that we just made and hit render and just see what happens. Also, I'm going to enable a little bit of blur in post. And we're going to let that sit for just a few more seconds, and there we go. All right, stars in the background is nice and good, nice and crisp. And I'm going to grab this this camera tag for Octane, and I'm going to set up the aperture at 2 and click on the planet, maybe 0.5, and just kind of put those stars a little out of focus because I think it'll look cool. Alright, so that is how you can set up a procedural planet in Octane using a lot of really cool settings. And the last thing I would do is just render this out, and that would be using Octane, setting it to a float buffer, and making sure that I render it in 32-bit, saving it out, and then bringing it into Photoshop and just color correcting it and pulling some blue values in all over the place, kind of taking all the other colors out a bit, desaturating it a bit, and that just gives it this very popular common space sort of theme to it. So I can show you the same right here. These values of lighting did need a little bit of work, but you know, you win some, you lose some, and that is how that works. So anyways, the last thing I want to say is that when you render in Octane and you output the final image, which I'm going to give an example right now, and I'm going to turn off saving and just hit render, you'll notice that when you do this and render it in 32-bit, it's going to take a few seconds to get this going, but you'll notice that it looks different. So if you had looked at this before and kind of go back in time and in the video and then go back to this, one thing you'll see is that this is going to be a flatter image. It's going to be more like an HDR image when you're taking photos with a DSLR. And that's going to be valuable because it's going to help you blend that light a lot better in post. So anyways, I'm going to let this just go ahead and render and get started rendering. And then I'm going to just give it some ridiculous value of samples and let it render through the night. And there you go. So now you'll see that this is a flat image. Looks very flat compared to where it was. And one of the nice things also is in the Octane Studio Kit, it comes with these color correction presets. So if we go into the presets, drop all the way down to the Octane Studio Kit, and go into the color corrections, and just double click on some of these, and just set it to blue overall. Go to the filter, enable the filter. It's a little intense. Might want to turn the contrast down. Try the underwater settings. Instead of 5%, I'll set it to -5%. Oops, that is definitely not the value I want. Set it to 0. Remove the exposure. Maybe try cold tone, or purple cross process isn't really working for me. Some of these are a little bit better for, I guess, more lit scenes. So maybe add that 2% contrast, a little exposure, pull down the reds and up the blues. Maybe not that high. So I'm going to put that back. Alright, and that is probably a good time to call it. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it there. That is Cinema 4D crashing. It's great. Sometimes Octane on my computer does crash a little bit, but it's usually pretty darn stable, and it's really exciting to be able to get to work on some really cool projects. So this is what I've been able to make with Octane in the Octane Studio Kit, without actually worrying about going to go ahead and close Cinema without worrying about anything in too particular about being in a studio, because, you know, the Octane Studio Kit, you may think off the bat, is just designed for studio lighting like these. But it's not entirely not entirely true. It's great for a lot of different purposes, and that's what I did with this. So anyways, I am Sam Welker from thinkparticle.com, and you can learn more about the Octane Studio Kit here. Thank you for sticking with me for such a long tutorial. And I think next time I might talk a little bit about this image right here, if anybody has any interest in that. Or I can talk about a lot of different other things I've made, like working with refraction and jello, or maybe break into Krakatoa. So just go ahead and leave a comment below if you have any particular interest in learning anything, and check out thinkparticle.com for great training besides this video, and products, and lots of other great things. We've got a lot of great products in the shop, and we now offer bundles, and in the bundles you can save a lot of money. If you're going to buy, say, the Think Particle or the TP Toolkit Pro and the Octane Studio Kit, or the Cloud Generator, and the other cloud generators, there are a lot of people that buy these things in conjunction, and now you have the option to save money in future purchases with bundles. So you can save 15% on this motion bundle right here, and then the big bundle you save $27, and there's a lot of different a lot of savings. And these are tools that are used in a lot of studios around the world. They've been used on projects for the Sky Network, CBS, studios in New York, studios in LA, all over the world. So actually, technically, I'm not sure if CBS used these products so much as Text Edge Effects, which is another product that I help work on with iDesign. So anyways, learn more about our great products here that support all of this great training that I get to make. And thank you very much for watching. I am Sam Welker, signing off, and I'll catch you guys next time. Make sure to leave comments below with any questions or future requests. And yeah, thanks.